Nacho Gimenez from Managing Partner at BP Ventures, and Bruce Niven. Niven, sorry. I did ask you that, and then I immediately forgot. So that's starting well. From Aramco Ventures, Head of Strategic Venturing. So yes, do sit down. So this is the sustainability panel. We talk about sustainability an awful lot these days. There's a Sustainability Council that you can join if you're interested. But I think it's really great to have sort of BP and Aramco here sort of in the hot seat to really talk about what's happening. When we did the prep call for this, I was really interested actually in how differently both BP and Aramco Ventures think about sustainability. So I thought that would be a good place to actually start, because the focus is on entirely different ways. There's obviously multiple routes to sustainability. And I just didn't realize that there was as much difference between energy companies on this. So why don't we start with you, Nacho? Tell us how BP views it, and then Bruce, you can kind of tell us the contrasting view almost from Aramco.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I would say to get to a sustainable energy system, you have two routes, clean electrons and clean molecules, and you cannot choose one. You're going to have to end up with a mix of both. So in BP, we're looking at renewables, clean electrons, electromobility, EV charging, but we're also looking at clean molecules. We're looking at clean hydrogen. We're looking at biofuels. We're looking at all the things that can decarbonize in a molecule today.
And Bruce, you sort of take more of a sort of cleaner fuels kind of
Yeah, we're
approach.
definitely more on the molecule side of the equation. So, we launched last year a new sustainability venturing fund, $1.5 billion. So it's one of the largest venture funds focused on the space. That's really got two main objectives. One is our operational decarbonization. And so certainly renewable energy, green electrons is part of that story. But the other focus is really on lower carbon fuels, so the clean molecules side of the business. We don't have a lot of biomass in Saudi Arabia, so biofuels less of a focus for us. And less focus on sort of getting into the utility business. So more on kind of hydrogen, synthetic renewable fuels and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And both, sizable funds and a lot of spending. But one question that always comes to mind, and recently it's been in my mind even more, is how committed is the parent company really to some of the things that you are proposing to them? Because I think we've seen in the press, there has been some pulling back from some of the more aggressive environmental commitments. I mean, even BP did kind of soften when how much it was going to the sort of emission reduction targets. And then we've seen other large oil companies like Exxon pulling out of its sort of algae project, and others. So and Shell also kind of rowing back on some other things. So I just wonder, how does it feel at the moment in terms of the kind of parent company commitment to what you're bringing to them as ideas?
Who do you want to
Let's put Bruce in the hot seat first with this.
Yeah, no, I think the commitment is actually very much there. And from what I've seen, it's top of mind of our CEO. Aramco announced, net zero goals for 2050 about 2 years ago, and there's interim targets for that in 2035. Those have not changed. Also, over the last year or two, there's been, announcements of significant investments into this space. So 12 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030, a 6 gigaton carbon capture project by 2027, plus our sustainability fund, right? So you're seeing billion-dollar commitments going into the space. We did announce a blue ammonia project. So this is ammonia produced from hydrogen from gas, with the carbon dioxide stored subsurface. That project was delayed this year because there wasn't sufficient offtake. Okay, so I think the industry is going to see bumps along the road like this. You have to match the right incentives, the right demand in order to get these projects built. Yeah, but I think that will come back in my opinion. And what's happening in the US with the IRA is actually driving a lot more focus on that market, and a lot more projects there are in the money. So I think the commitment is still there, but all these things have to come together on individual initiatives to make them work.
Yeah. And you're not personally seeing any sort of, pushback that might be coming from, say, the shareholders or, any other parts of the business to say, how fast should we go on this?
No, I would say the opposite, actually. The shareholder is pushing us to do more. Yeah.
Okay. And Nacho?
So in 2020, BP made the commitment, the public commitment in our aims of becoming a net zero company by 2050 or earlier. And that objective hasn't changed in the slightest. But it's true that a lot of things have changed in the world since 2020, since February 2020. And yes, sometimes you have to adjust the road or the route as you go, and you have to be pacing that according to what you see the conditions. But it's top of mind, same as in Aramco, in BP. It's in every meeting we discuss, it's in every investment case we look at, it's in our performance contracts, and is a commitment that we're going to meet.
Okay. So, but then the other question, and I think this is the one that you didn't really like me asking, was about the speed. That are we going fast enough on this?
So the commitment by BP is net zero by 2050 or earlier.
Okay.
We would like it to be earlier, but we know that BP alone is not going to create a decarbonized energy system. No company is going to create a decarbonized energy system. We need to be working with society, with governments, and these three parts need to be working together, right? So no company, no government, no society alone is going to achieve it. So it has to be together. So I personally have no doubt that we're going to have a decarbonized energy system. I don't know when, but we are going for that 2050 or earlier.
Yeah. But what would you say then? So what's coming in as the bottlenecks? And it would be quite good to kind of discuss sort of how, like what's coming. I mean, I guess sort of the lack of uptake was one that you mentioned, Bruce. And is that because the price isn't right? We're not being able to sort of get the relative pricing, at the level we need it to, and how can we kind of move beyond some of that?
Yeah, I think really a couple of things that I would say. I think in the energy system, to change it, you're fundamentally having to take new technologies into a commodity industry that works at very large scale, right? That's a very hard thing to do with new technology. If you look at how long the PV industry took to actually get uptake, and that is now starting to ramp. PV technology was invented back in the 60s or 70s. It's now just beginning to scale. So all of these technologies actually require some level of incentive to, typically regulatory incentive to come into the market. And those things, have to be set at the right level so that you can bring the technologies down the cost curve and make viable projects. The industry has a role, of course, to scale those and invest in those down that curve as well. I think, so that's one limitation, right? Again, the IRA, I think, in the US has made a big switch. We'll see whether other areas follow. Carbon pricing is now, covering something like 25% of the world's, energy supply, or in at different levels in different jurisdictions. The other challenge, I think, in the energy sector is just the scale that you have to get to in commercializing new technologies. So, you need multiple levels of scaling with increasing level of capital investment often to get these technologies to the point that they're competitive in the market. So those investments of $50–100 million in first-of-a-kind demonstration plants, which still carry quite substantial risk, that is challenging. And so you need the industry, you need private investors, all coming together around those projects. So that's difficult. Yeah.
And again, I think, we were talking, for example, about, sustainable aviation fuel and how, the problem with that is the price is just not compatible with anything, the existing products. So how do we kind of start to overcome some of those things?
I think we're trying to make a massive change in society. This is not just changing the energy system. This is changing all we do every day. We consume a lot of energy all the time, right? So sustainable aviation fuel, it is expensive. It is a lot more expensive than mineral jet, right? Mm-hmm. And we may have to get used to the fact that energy is going to be an expensive thing for a few decades until we get very good at it. Oil was very expensive initially until We've been working on it for 100, 120 years, 150 years, and we got really good at it, right? We can drill a well 6 kilometers underwater in Angola, provide it to bring the oil to a refinery, and produce jet and petrol cheaper than you get mineral water, right? So we've got really good at it. And with this technology, it's going to have to be similar. There's a learning curve. We're going to have to accept that for some years, maybe things are a bit more expensive. And while we improve the systems, but energy is expensive. Energy is a valuable resource.
Yeah. So what would be nice is, I mean, talk is about the role of ventures in making the energy sector more sustainable. So it'd be nice to hear a little bit about some of the specifics in your portfolios. I mean, what projects do you have in right now that you feel particularly kind of excited about, or, you know, that you think are kind of coming up? I mean, maybe starting with you, Nacho. I mean,
I have a growth mindset, and I always get excited about the latest thing. So I think our latest announcement of investment in 5B, which is a company that moves to build a solar farm, moves the field work into a warehouse. So you basically build a concertina made of solar panels, and you go to the field and you just open it. There you have your solar farm, right? So that allows us to move much faster to build out these PV farms, right? We're working on something that is really exciting, but as the previous panel said, I cannot talk about it. So that's going to have to wait a little bit. But we have a lot of success working with companies that are helping us develop or roll out EV charging around the world, from Blue Smart in India to FreeWire in the US, are companies that are pushing that BP Pulse, so EV charging business unit that we have, right? So a lot of great examples of collaborating with those startups.
And what would be good is just to hear about how does then the process. So again, if we take the example of the sort of concertina solar farm, you know, in a box, as it were, how does the process then go in terms of you've made the initial investment into them, and then how are you working now to kind of integrate that into the rest of kind of BP, or, you know, working with various business units or getting them together? I mean, is that, you know, do you have a kind of a good playbook for that now, or are you able to talk us through that?
BP Ventures existed for about 15 years, and we developed that playbook during the time. We do a lot of the work up front. So when we make an investment, we know how the business unit is going to be collaborating with these companies. It has its challenges because the business units have operational targets that they have to meet in. They have a business to run, and on top of that, you're telling them to do something new, something that they have never done before, right? Something that is maybe with a small company and they speak different languages, not physical languages, but in terms of the BP corporate language and the small startup language, right? So we help that from the BP Venture side. We have an interest. We invest because we can make those connections.
Yeah. So again, because I love sort of staying with the specific example. Tell me if we go past the territory where you don't want to reveal stuff. But I mean, what would be your hope for, again, this solar farm in a box? You know, would it be that they would start? Are they starting already? Have they already gone beyond a pilot project, or are they just starting with that? And how quickly do you think can that become something that could be really significant and a significant part of the business unit?
So BP Ventures. Let me link now here with how we invest. BP Ventures invests about $200 million a year in startups. We bring the capital, but we bring our energy and our time. We are very active investors. We want these companies to be collaborating with our business units. We want them to be growing. If we go too early, we're going to be diluted. We're going to spend our time working with companies that still don't have a product market fit, that maybe the technology hasn't been validated. So we're happy to be in touch with those companies, but we like to invest at that Series A, Series B spot. When the company is able to connect with our business units in a meaningful way and go and sell, go and deploy, right? So if we go too early, it's not the best use of our time. We want to go a bit later. BP has the capacity to scale up these technologies, right? So we want to make sure that we are in that sweet spot.
Okay. So they're right for scaling up, and then you're putting everything in place so that, you know, again, they can have that relationship with the business unit, and then hopefully it becomes, you know, I mean, a global level scale, you know, straight away, or start with one country?
It depends what the startup can do as well, right? So
Okay.
if you let it loose in BP will want a lot, but you need to pace the startup as well.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Bruce? And is there something that you're very excited about?
Yeah, I guess within our sustainability portfolio, the one I would highlight is a grid energy storage company called Enervenue. I mean, we've actually done, I think, 5 investments in grid energy storage. And we definitely see it as a space which is now really poised to accelerate, you know, with renewable penetration reaching those levels now, the increasing need for it on the grid. And also within Saudi Arabia, you know, we have the NEOM development. The idea of that is a new city which will be 100% renewables from the get-go, which I don't think has ever been done anywhere else in the world. And you need storage in right at the beginning. Yeah. So, you know, with their technology, it's kind of cost competitive with what we see, where we see the lithium-ion battery trend going, but it's extremely robust. So it can handle high temperatures, it can handle very aggressive charge and discharge. You don't need to air condition it. And it turns out that has a lot of value to utilities. They don't want to be running a fleet of maintenance engineers servicing air conditioning on battery, you know, installations all around their grid. So it's getting very strong pull. They're constructing a gigafactory now in the US.
So what's the chemistry that's based on? Is it lithium ion or?
So it's a metal hydrogen battery technology. It was actually originally used by NASA in the space program in the 60s and 70s, and then it's updated chemistry developed at Caltech, which is much lower cost. Okay. But this thing proven to run already 30,000 cycles, which is, you know, very, very long duration.
Okay. And then the way that, again, Aramco's worked with it, so you've made an investment fairly recently, is that?
Fairly recently, yeah. And so, you know, we're piloting in Saudi to see it does do what it claims in that environment. You know, it will go into, ultimately, we hope, some of those renewable projects that we'll be investing in to, you know, also help us supply us with, you know, day-round renewable energy for electrifying our operations.
Yeah, okay.
Or, you know, green hydrogen projects, synthetic fuel projects.
Yeah.
All those kinds of
things. So if the pilot goes well, there's already kind of a path to scaling then this up in various projects.
In principle, yes. It's always a bit of a stepwise thing, you know, see how it goes, and then we do the next step.
Okay.
And there's multiple steps to get things up to really industrial scale in the energy business.
Yeah. Okay. And do you ever find that there are, you know, roadblocks? Because obviously, if the pilot doesn't go well or there's something wrong with the technology, that's, you know, that's its own showstopper for understandable reasons. But I'm just wondering whether, you know, are there other kind of, because we all know that the art of being a good corporate investor is kind of making sure that, you know, you can smooth the process of these ventures through the company. So I'm just wondering whether there's any thoughts you have on sort of, you know, what you've learned over the years of how to make sure that you go from that, you know, really go from the investment and the pilot to real use, you know.
I mean, I think, you know, everyone in the room is in the corporate VC audience by and large, so they all know this issue. It's something we put a lot of effort on from the beginning. So we have a business development team within the venture group, you know, really focused on making sure we're aligned with the business needs, and then afterwards, you know, getting it through the process. But I think a lot of it is actually helping to steer the corporate level processes in terms of, you know, where does emerging technology fit into the business's overall strategy? You know, do you have the right processes in place to actually be able to sort of, you know, make sure that you can trial at scale in your bigger projects, you know, go through piloting to demonstration and then ultimately large-scale projects. So it really is you know, it goes beyond the venture group, and it's about getting the venture group really integrated into the corporate strategic roadmap.
Yeah. So you, like many people, have invested specifically in that business development function in your team. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a theme across the board. I mean, and BP does this, you know, as well quite a lot.
We do it with the business units, we do it from ventures, we do it in multiple areas. And BP is so big, we have so many verticals that yes, it's all over the company.
But what about, same question though, any kind of pearls of wisdom for what you've learned about kind of smoothing, you know, oiling the wheels of that sort of from venture into actual use process?
I would say the best part of a corporate that understands startups is the ventures team, or client venturing, whatever you have in that space. So my learning is, don't expect the business unit to just have the relationship with the startup and everything to happen. You need to hold the hand, you need to be there, you need to be asking and helping that relationship, that that communication.
Okay, so really proactive stance.
Yep.
Now, I'd just like to signal that if anybody has burning questions, we will be, put your hand up and we'll see if we can get you a roving mic. And while we're waiting for you to kind of think of whether you have a question, I have one which is just, it's a little bit related to this kind of, are we going fast enough? But it's kind of like, could we do more with more? I mean, you have pretty big budgets, Bruce, yours is probably one of the biggest around. But, if you had double that, could you do, things you can't do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we set the size of that fund to do what we want to do with it. And even with, with 1.5 billion, we will be investing in multiple technologies within each domain that we're focused on. And we've got 8 or 9 main focus areas that we're targeting there. We'll do a number of smaller investments. We'll do a smaller number of larger ones on the ones that really break out. So I feel like it's the right level for what we're trying to do today. If the scope expands, sure, maybe there's a role for a larger venture program. But I think that's the right level today. It doesn't mean that that's all the capital that's available for those technologies, right? If things start getting to the stage where they're really going into large-scale projects, then you do go into the corporate, decision-making process, and that's not coming out of the venture fund.
Mm-hmm.
Similar MVP. We are hands-on investors. So if we deploy more capital, we're not going to be able to spend a lot more time with the startups.
Mm-hmm.
So 200 million a year feels about right for what we can manage. If it goes beyond that, there's JVs that we can do with the companies, with the business units. There's M&A that we can do, right? The acquisition of Archaea, biogas producer in the US last year, shows that BP can spend billions when the opportunity is right and we want to have a bigger relationship. So ventures is only one of the units that does the innovation.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. And so that's about the right budget probably for now
for ventures.
For ventures. Right. Anybody in the room want to at this point put their hand up and ask about this? No?
There's a couple of questions.
Oh, okay. Yes, there we go. 2 in the front there. Why don't we start here and then? It's a hard room to kind of scan because it's so long.
Hi.
It's off.
Is this on?
Oh, I think it's come on now. Is it?
Hello. So my question is, what support can you provide to startups in terms of the quite intense structural changes that would enable cleaner energies?
What support we provide to startups sorry?
What kind of support can you provide to startup companies that are, they have a really good idea as to how to, for example, decarbonize, but there are quite big structural changes, infrastructure changes that need to take place? What support can you offer for that kind of barrier to technology?
Do you mean because in order to kind of have, you need to build out a grid, or, you need to, if you want to switch to hydrogen, you need to have something to transport the hydrogen around, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe I can take a shot at it, right? We certainly can't solve everything. But I think the way we approach it is, yes, we try to be a strategic partner. So we try to help, whether it's technology collaboration or deploying the technology where we can in our operation. But we do also try to act as a professional investment group as well, right? So, we've got 100+ companies in the portfolio now. We sit on boards. We have a lot of experience about how these businesses do, work through the different challenges in the energy sector. So whether it's finding the right people to try and, strengthen the company, or the right advisors, other sources of funds, the typical things that an investor will try to do, we do try to offer that as well.
I think it depends on the vertical. If we're talking about hydrogen, there's no hydrogen value chain or supply chain today. So the support is doing pilots, and while we progress the big hydrogen projects that we have, we're going to be evaluating your technology maybe to deploy in those. In EV charging is different, right? You have a solution for EV charging. You just need a contract to deploy faster. Here's the contract, right? Go and install in all these areas. So it depends a little bit where it is. If it's about building a new plant, maybe we can provide some engineering support or technical support, right? So it depends on the vertical that we're talking about.
That's good. I think we had another question here.
Thank you very much for the talk. My name is Matt Hastings. I look after the Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund, working for Innovate UK. We've heard a lot about collaboration, partnerships, ecosystem. Do you guys partner together? If not, why not? And how could you?
Maybe I can take that one. So I think we have many co-investments with BP and many of the other CVCs in the oil and gas industry. There was also, we set up an organization called the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative about 5 years ago. So that was $1 billion fund as well. It was funded by I think 11 oil and gas companies are part of that. And that was really specifically designed to try to go into some of these harder areas common across the industry in a collaborative approach. So yes, I mean, we have to respect the boundaries of competition law and all that kind of stuff. But I would say that in the venture space, there's more collaboration than competition.
Yeah, what's your view, Nacho, on sort of co-investment, and how much of it do you think there could be more that could be done, or do you think those things like the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative are really where they should be channeled?
No, we support the OGCI, obviously, but we could do more co-investments. We are always open to collaboration. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we have as humankind, right? So I think collaboration is the answer.
Yep.
It's not that. Maybe a follow-up. Is there an interesting sort of open source proof of concept? Say you're a startup, rather than trying multiple POCs for multiple oil and gas firms, trying to collectively then get results and go further. Something that came up at the end, you guys.
I think it's an interesting question. I think actually there is potential for doing more there, right? You see a lot of times, startups have to sort of prove themselves to many, many different people. I don't think that's unique to the energy industry either. Yeah. It gets tricky with confidentiality and people being worried about talking about sensitive information. But yeah, to the extent you can prove something once and then everybody accepts it, that's better. There have been, standardization initiatives across the industry in different areas, less around new technology, but to try and just make the whole thing more efficient. I would say that, yeah, maybe things could be done there.
I think in the same way that we collaborate on the investment, on the equity side, we could collaborate on bigger projects as we move forward, right? So at the moment, if a pilot is 100,000 to 100,000, corporates will want to do themselves. But as we go into big tech, big kit, expensive kit, maybe there's definitely the scope for big corporates to collaborate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe can I just come back to your point about the pace of change?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I do think it seems often, I think things move very slowly in the energy business. Things do have very long incubation periods because you've got to get down the cost curve and you get to that point where technologies do become competitive. But then once they get there, the adoption is a sigmoid curve. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So now we're seeing it in renewables, we're seeing it in electric vehicles. So things like hydrogen, like carbon capture, electrolysis, energy storage, I'm still confident that we will hit those points, right? And then the longer term future looks very different from what it does today.
Yeah, yeah. And then it'll be interesting if we, when we start adding fusion to the mix and all those things as well. But the clock is sort of blinking at me, suggesting that we are well and truly out of time. So apologies if you didn't get a question in, but thank you so much, Bruce and Nacho, for, kind of bringing us up to speed. And it sounds like there is a lot going on. So watch this space.
Thank you.